Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to be beginning the webinar in just a few minutes, letting everyone filter in. So happy to have you joining us this afternoon. Hopefully you'll be able to eat some lunch while you listen to our local experts on the digital divide. We have a nice number of registrants today, so pleased that so many of you could join us. And I think we're getting close. So welcome everyone to our September Focus Forum. I'm Rita Riker, President of the Board of Focus Greater Syracuse. Our topic today is Bridging the Digital Divide in Central New York, and we have some great local experts who will be speaking on the topic. They'll be formally introduced in just a moment. As usual, we're scheduled for 1 hour today, and we are recording this session. We're excited to have a robust registration for this forum, nearly 100 registrants today. Our format includes 5 to 10 minute presentations from 4 guests, followed by Q&A. We received a number of questions for today's forum, and we will ask as many as time permits. But you may also add questions in the Q&A if you have one. Board member Brian Hope will be facilitating the Q&A period. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator for this session and Focus's 2016 Wisdom Keeper, Dr. Sharon Brangman, who will introduce our panelists. Just a few highlights about her. Dr. Brangman is a distinguished service professor and chair of the Department of Geriatrics, as well as director of the Center for Excellence for Alzheimer's Disease at SUNY Upstate University. Although originally from Brooklyn, we're going to claim her as our own. She, having graduated from Nottingham High School in Syracuse, received her undergraduate degree in biology from Syracuse University and her medical degree from SUNY Upstate Medical University. A leader in the field of geriatrics, she is nationally recognized expert on Alzheimer's disease and the cultural issues of aging, like the digital divide. She is known by her patients, family, and colleagues alike for her dedication, passion, and her warm, caring manner. Great to have you with us, Sharon. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rita, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon to discuss the digital divide that impacts so many in our region. There's really nothing like a pandemic to demonstrate the inequities in internet access for people who live in urban and rural communities. This impacts every aspect of our lives, from banking to job hunting to being able to work from home to education. And in my geriatrics practice, we've had to help our patients who often have landlines or at best a flip phone, manage everything from telehealth appointments to signing up for COVID vaccines online and to helping them to stay connected with families and friends to avoid being socially isolated. These challenges are significant, and we're going to discuss those this afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce each of our speakers, whose full bios are available for you in the promotional materials. So in the interest of time, I will make these introductions brief. Our first speaker is David Botar, who will lay the groundwork for the forum. David is Executive Director of the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board, which just completed a 4-county study of broadband access that's focused on rural committees. He will be followed by 3 panelists who will talk about initiatives underway to address the digital divide. Kevin Saxton is Chief Information Officer for Onondaga County, and he will discuss the county's efforts to address broadband access. Jennifer Tift, previously Deputy Commissioner for the Syracuse's Department of Neighborhood and Business Development, is now the Mayor's Director of Strategic Initiatives. Jennifer is managing the city's $123 million American Rescue Plan Act, and she's going to speak to us about plans to use some of these funds to address the digital divide. And then we'll have Annabeth Hayes, who is the director of the Tully Free Library and co-founder of the Central New York Digital Inclusion Coalition. She will focus on the human side of the digital divide and the role of digital navigators in helping individuals navigate internet and device choices and build their digital literacy skills. We're very excited to have this panel today, and I'm going to now turn it over to David to get us started.
Thank you, Sharon. Great to be with you, the Focus team, and our community this afternoon. Let me start by giving a very brief intro to who the Regional Planning Board is. So we are a public planning and development agency formed by our 5-member counties here in Central New York years ago, back in 1966. Our 5-member counties are Cayuga, Cortland, Madison, Onondaga, and Oswego counties. We do work across a broad range of public policy areas, including economic development, environmental planning, energy, land use, transportation, and community development. One of the issues that has certainly been on our back burner in recent years is the question about broadband service, particularly in rural areas in Central New York. This is often an issue that is discussed at the county level and with local officials when residents in our region bring up concerns about the lack of service, again, particularly in rural areas. This past year, this issue became really on our front burner because of the COVID-19 pandemic, when many families had to work from home, learn from home, and socialize from home. And what clearly was brought to the forefront is for families and businesses located in rural areas particularly, they may not have any access at all to modern broadband service in their communities. So that issue really was a topic of great discussion and concern here in this region and across upstate New York, and I think across the nation. What we decided to do is to take a closer look at the issue, to see what the problem is in a more detailed, granular level here in Central New York. And so we secured a grant from the Federal Economic Development Administration to hire a consultant to actually do an inventory of broadband service in our region and to come up with a plan for addressing the gaps in service. And it's really the gaps in service that is the focus of our study and the work we're doing with our member counties right now. We understand that there are certainly issues related to the affordability of broadband service in this region and issues regarding digital literacy. But the focus of our attention with our study is on this gaps in service. What we know is in rural areas, some communities, some homes, some businesses don't have service. And this is despite a very robust broadband system that we have here in Central New York and in upstate New York. This broadband system was primarily built out by private companies, internet service providers, telephone companies. Companies like Verizon and Spectrum certainly took a lead role. But there are smaller companies as well that have built out a very robust system. But because of the cost of building out this infrastructure, certain rural areas in our community where there are not many customers are not being served. Now, the state of New York stepped up several years ago with the new New York Broadband Initiative and spent over $500 million to improve broadband service, primarily in rural communities in upstate New York. And that initiative was very successful, but there are still gaps in service here in our region and across upstate New York. There's also been some regulatory efforts through the Public Service Commission to bring charter communication and spectrum to the table to, again, take steps to build out service in our rural communities. That has also been helpful. There have also been federal grants that have been awarded to some of the internet service companies, and also to some counties across the state, which will help build out additional broadband service. But again, despite all of these efforts and the significant investment of millions and millions of dollars, there are still families and businesses in our region that do not have service to their homes or business. So the focus of our study, we hired a consultant, ECC Technologies, And the consultant went out into the field and literally drove all of the public roads outside of the urban areas in central New York. So outside of the city of Syracuse, outside of the urban area here in Onondaga County, and some of the other principal cities in the region. And they inventoried, they visually observed where broadband service exists and where there is no service. And they mapped that information. So we now have a very good idea of where there is gaps in broadband service here in our region. If you look at it county by county, here in Onondaga County, there's about 200 miles where there is no broadband service along the public road, the public right of way. And there's approximately 1,000 households without modern broadband service. In 3 of other 4 counties, there's, the gaps in service amount to 300 to 400 miles of roadway. So that's a significant issue that we want to see addressed here in this region. Now, how do we go about addressing it? First of all, we have to recognize that the cost of building out broadband service is very expensive. It's cost approximately $40,000 to $50,000 per mile to build out additional broadband service in any community. So obviously that's very expensive. And again, the internet service companies are confronted with a difficult business decision. In many cases, it does not make business sense for them to build out additional service unless they get some form of support from the public sector. And that's where we're focused on now. So we have the study completed in draft form. In the next week or 2, we'll be receiving from our consultant the detailed information. We'll be receiving a high-level capital plan to build out the service and some recommendations for what each of our member counties can do to help address the gap in service. One of the best examples we have in this region is Madison County. They received a grant in July of this year, a federal grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture called a Reconnect grant. They received a $10.5 million grant from the federal government, and they will use that grant to work with a third-party internet service company to build out additional service in Madison County. That is just one example of different approaches that can be used. We're also working with our other member counties to look at possibly using Federal American Rescue Plan funding, ARPA funding, to underwrite the cost, and or to use our study as the basis for applying for additional federal grants, like what Madison County received this year. Timing-wise, the study, again, will be completed shortly. We'll be working with each of our member counties over the next 3 to 4 months to develop a game plan. And then hopefully we'll see some action starting in 2022 and certainly going into 23 and 2024. So that's where we stand with our study. Let me turn this over now to Kevin, who will give you a closer look at what Onondaga County is considering. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I'd like to take a minute to talk about how we've been looking at the digital divide, particularly in the rural areas of Onondaga County over the last several years, going back as many as 5-6 years ago. Our chairman of the legislature, Dave Knapp, reached out to me, and he represents a number of towns in our lower tier, southern tier of the county. And he'd had a number of concerns, complaints, directed to him about that lack of availability down there. And we started to latch on to the New York State broadband program, which was starting at that time. And we got involved in conferences, got involved in Q&A, provided information. And, we were recruiting ISPs to try to participate in those programs. There was 3 phases of the New York State broadband program. Unfortunately, the first 2 phases, there was no census tracts that were allowed for bid in Onondaga County. Most of that was due to the merger agreement with between New York State and Spectrum, well, rather Charter Communications. And finally, in phase 3, there were a small number of census blocks available for bid. There were some awards as part of phase 3. 1,753 properties were addressed. However, 1,660 of those properties were awarded to a satellite internet company. Now, thing against satellite internet companies, because if there's nothing else, it provides a service. It's better in DSL, and it's capable of decent download speeds. It's not capable of good upload speeds. But in the download speeds come at a pretty high cost. I believe it's common for 50 megabits of service download for $100 a month and 100 megabits of service at $150 a month. And that's just too high. And we also know the problems with satellite, with high latency, and also they're adversely affected by bad weather. So to me, it's not true broadband. I think a lot of people would agree with me. And, don't misunderstand me about the New York State broadband program. It was ambitious, well-intentioned, but as David mentioned, it left thousands and thousands still in the dark. Once we understood this, our county executive made it a big priority to come up with a plan to get broadband to those without. And we were made aware of the regional planning board's project that they were working on. So we didn't want to step on toes and duplicate efforts. So we reached out to David Botar and his team, and they were in the midst of doing their inventory, as David stated, the physical survey of the county. So we started to work together on that effort. ECC Planning did a great job on their surveys. They also, as David mentioned, did the online surveys as well. So those, as David also mentioned, it gave us the realization or the understanding of the unserved areas truly, and also the addresses, the properties within those areas. So that gives us the information to move forward. We've been working for the last several weeks on the RFP. As David mentioned, again, it'll be completed shortly. And, the county executive is committing to allocate up to $15 million of funding to help finance the project. And we hope to get it released soon. We'd like to target the award to happen, possibly within the first quarter of 2022. We'd like to have some wording in our RFP to have the ISP, the awarded ISPs. It could be one, there could be multiple, depending on how it goes. We'd like them to affiliate with the Emergency Broadband Benefits Program to allow for low-cost internet options. So, that more or less kind of addresses, and we've been staying on top of the bills that are going out with Clarity Connects and such, which are still wrapping up now in the southern tier. That kind of describes what we've been trying to do to stay on top of the project. I've been asked to speak to a number of towns within the county to see where we're at, and obviously there's still concerns out there. We also have some initiatives within the city of Syracuse to, even in a small way, to help address the digital divide. We have a free Wi-Fi project, which is being run by our IT director of County Library, Dane Dell. And this would address adjacent areas in the perimeter outside 8 of our county libraries that are located within the city. And so it's a pilot project. We're going to learn a lot from it, but we're hopeful. We think it's going to address, the perimeter within 1, possibly 3-4 blocks, depending on the obstructions in the area. Again, we're going to learn, and the project is expandable. If it's a success, we get a high rate of usage. It can probably add other technologies, possibly 5G for, higher connections and higher speeds. So it's moving along. The funding has been secured through the CARES grant. There's in the installation. So once contracts are in place, we'll have timelines and project plans to identify when these things will start. The libraries that we're focusing on in the city are Beauchamp, Betts, Hazard, Monday, Payne, Pettit, Sewell, and White. I also want to quickly mention that the library has also been offering a tech pack program for the last few years, where for patrons, they can borrow a Chromebook and hotspot. They can borrow that for a 3-week period, and that's been a pretty good success as well. So with that said, we partner quite a bit with the city of Syracuse on a number of initiatives, including many IT initiatives. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, and that would be Jennifer Tiff, Director of Strategic Initiatives from the city of Syracuse, to discuss her initiatives to address the digital divide within the city of Syracuse. So Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Kevin. All right, so I'm really happy to be with you all today, and so glad to see that this is a topic of interest for all of you. It's certainly an area that we're very focused on in the city, and as Kevin said, we're closely in partnership with the county and certainly some of our regional partners, like the Regional Planning Board as well, to really try to address this issue. So one of the things that, I think is really critical to understand, because I think, Dave did a really great job of explaining, sort of the underserved areas or the unserved areas, meaning literally where we do not have the technology in place to connect people to the internet. But in the city of Syracuse, we have a little bit of a different challenge. Nonetheless, it's a very significant challenge. And this is probably similar in other urban areas around the state. Our challenge isn't so much that we don't have, all of our parcels technically wired for the internet. In fact, we do. But the challenge is one of affordability and access. And that creates, in effect, a digital divide where it really doesn't need to exist. We've got internet service providers here in the city of Syracuse, in particular with Spectrum and Verizon, who've taken the lead in providing a number of services, whether those are wired services, whether those are wireless services. But the reality is a very large portion of our households in the city of Syracuse cannot and do not connect to the internet. And we believe that is directly correlated to issues like poverty in the city. We know we have various parts of our city that really struggle with concentrated poverty, and that really is a direct correlation to internet access. One of the interesting things I'll put in the chat just for folks to see if you haven't seen this yet, the NTIA, which is a federal agency that looks at some of these things, they've done a mapping exercise, and they actually have taken into account indicators of broadband need, which I think is an interesting way to look at the map. So this map does not show areas that are not wired for internet. Some of those mapping exercises that Dave mentioned were being done to really assess where there is internet in the rural areas. But rather, this mapping shows where there are other key indicators that broadband, in effect, does not exist for communities. And so that could be, for example, the census does regular surveying of households for connectivity to the internet. So that includes some of the census data. It also actually very interestingly includes data from companies like Microsoft. I think for everyone who does connect to the internet like we are right now for this web session, companies like Microsoft push you updates for your computer. Those updates get pushed out over an internet connection. So, as a company, they track upload and download speed. So in effect, it really measures the true connectivity rate of our internet connections. And so, I think this mapping is interesting because it does actually show truly where there is internet connectivity at broadband level speeds and where there isn't. And the thing that surprises a lot of people is that many parts of the city of Syracuse, in fact, it looks like almost, half of the map of the city of Syracuse, is not connected to the internet in effect, in reality, whether it's because they can't afford to be connected or maybe they just have a very basic service that connects at very basic upload download speeds, what wouldn't allow you to necessarily do the things that we've all relied on the internet to do for the last 18 months, whether that's, attend meetings like this, whether that's apply for jobs, and other types of things to stay connected to family, friends, and do your work and do your schoolwork. So one of the things that the city is really interested in doing is playing a more direct and active role in providing internet services to people in households that are really being affected by either an inability to afford internet or just kind of lack of access to those really high-speed internet connections. As Kevin indicated, in addition to the county's program at the county libraries for free Wi-Fi, we've undertaken a pilot in the last couple months, which also provides free Wi-Fi in a radius around several of our community centers. So similar to the county, we're really interested in testing this out, seeing if that at least is a potential source of connectivity for those neighborhoods that are immediately adjacent to those community centers. Of course, those include places like the Southwest Community Center, the Northeast Community Center, Westcott, La Liga, and others. But more recently, and especially with the availability of American Rescue Plan dollars through the federal government, the city has been really fortunate to kind of see a path to providing broadband quality internet connections directly to people's households. And we're basically looking to put out an RFP. It will probably come out in the next month or two. And really the purpose is to work with the private sector to embed more of a city network that folks could connect to. Again, our primary purpose is to really target those low-income households that do not have the ability to connect to the internet today in the city. So first and foremost, our priority is getting folks who cannot connect, connected. And so we're really looking to target those parts of the city that you see on that map that I shared, which are really shaded in red in that high heat map area. And so we'll be looking to make some investments, likely in some additional fiber assets that the city, can own and operate, but also in likely, other wireless solutions that can really extend the network capabilities and provide last mile connectivity to a lot more households. I don't think we're interested necessarily in tearing up every street and installing city fiber to every home. That would certainly be, as Dave mentioned, an incredibly expensive undertaking and incredibly timely endeavor. So we really want to look for, flexible solutions that will allow us to both increase the capacity through, some fiber-based assets, but really also deploy a network cost effectively and quickly. That's the other key thing, because we know people are really struggling with this today. This has been an issue since before the pandemic. It became exacerbated during the pandemic. It's still very much an issue today. So we're really trying to find solutions that we can undertake in the next 6-12 months to start connecting more households in the city of Syracuse. We don't want to wait, 2 years or 3 years to see folks connected. So in a nutshell, we're really excited to be undertaking some of this ourselves. We think this is an important role for the city to play, and for the first time in a long time, we have some resources to be able to do this. So I'm certainly happy to answer questions. Another thing that we're really exploring, and this is where I'll introduce Annabeth, is we realize that there's sort of 3 requirements for effective broadband access. One's obviously the technology itself, meaning the connection to the internet that you get through those ISPs or through a network provider. There's obviously the devices that you connect with. So you need a computer or a laptop or tablet or a phone to actually access the internet. But the third leg of that stool is really related to technical assistance and support. And we know that there are many folks in our community who maybe they've never used the internet or they've never had access to a device. And so they may not know, even if you gave them a device, what to do, how to effectively access it, how to steer clear of some of the hazards that are on the internet, because we know there's a lot of folks trying to take advantage of people on the internet too. And so folks need some technical assistance as well, training and user support. And so there's this concept around a digital navigator, which is a service very much in line with other social services that can be provided to people to increase their digital literacy and make them effective users and stewards of the internet. And so, this has been effectively rolled out in other communities in our country. We're really excited to try to explore a digital navigator program for Syracuse and for Central New York. And one of the organizations we're working with to explore this is our Central New York Digital Inclusion Coalition, which of course is in large part led by many of our librarians. And in this way, I'll introduce Annabeth Hayes, who can talk a little bit about some of the work the libraries are doing, but also what we're doing around digital navigator type solutions.
Thanks so much, Jen. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. My name is Annabeth Hayes. I'm the director of the Tully Free Library, and I'm also the co-chair of the Central New York Digital Inclusion Coalition, which is a group of community stakeholders working together to create a unified voice in support of digital inclusion. So like Jen mentioned, you might have heard the phrase, the three-legged stool of digital equity. As she said, one leg refers to affordable broadband internet, the second leg, affordable devices, and then the third leg is digital literacy skills. And all three are equally important for balancing the stool and achieving digital equity in the community. Many governments and municipalities are focusing on the internet infrastructure aspect of the digital divide, which admittedly is very important. But what good is having broadband internet infrastructure if those with the greatest needs can't afford an internet plan or devices and don't have the digital literacy skills that they need to use either of those? And then the next question people usually ask is why community-based organizations like public libraries don't have the capability of helping those in the community who are affected by the digital divide. Well, we are, in fact. Libraries have been focused on the digital divide for many years. People visit libraries to use our Wi-Fi or public computers because they can't afford them. Or in the case of many in our county, there's simply no broadband internet available where they live. Out in Tully, we have people using the library's Wi-Fi at all hours of the day and night. And all the libraries in Onondaga County lend out tech packs with hotspots and laptops, but these are in very high demand and they're not a permanent solution to achieving digital equity. People also come to us for tech assistance at the libraries, whether they need help applying for a job online or they have a new cell phone that they're trying to learn to navigate. The problem is that achieving digital equity requires lots of staff time, training, and financial resources that many public libraries simply don't have. So the Central New York Digital Inclusion Coalition has been working on a plan to address the human-focused aspects of digital equity by creating a digital navigator plan in Onondaga County, which would train people to become digital navigators. And then those people would go out and help people one-on-one to get affordable home internet and devices, and also increase their digital literacy skills. Our program focuses on making digital equity accessible to everyone, but especially those most affected by the digital divide because of affordability or accessibility, or because they just don't have the opportunity to gain digital skills. Our digital navigators will be embedded within trusted local organizations, such as community centers and libraries. They will be themselves members of the local community, and they'll possess the knowledge and skills necessary to work with people from diverse backgrounds. We will work collaboratively with other local organizations, for example, using the skills of translators when there's a language barrier. We're also looking into options for refurbishing and updating devices and distributing them to those in need. So up until very recently, there haven't been many funds available solely for digital inclusion efforts. so that community-based organizations like libraries and community centers can dedicate resources to the more time and labor-intensive aspects of digital equity. This is finally starting to happen with American Rescue Plan funds and private foundation grants, which is great news, but ongoing governmental funding would help immensely. Last year, the New York State Legislature approved a $15 million digital inclusion grant, but Governor Cuomo failed to approve it. We now have another chance with Governor Hochul and our state legislators to advocate on behalf of sustainable state funding for digital inclusion. It's my hope that as funding for digital equity becomes more widely available, our Digital Navigators program will be one of many throughout the country focusing on digital equity and will become a sustainable model for addressing the digital divide in Central New York. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brian Hoke, who's going to lead the Q&A.
Hey, everybody. Thank you to our panelists. Very much appreciate your statements, particularly the wide, diverse ways in which you come at this problem, this sort of varied problem. My job's either very easy or very difficult because a lot of the questions we got, thank you to people for sending those in, you've touched on, but I guess I'll emphasize some of those questions where people ask for a little bit more information. We had a couple questions on how work is being done to help seniors in particular, right? I mean, we know that one's ability to work with technology is often inversely associated with age. I know our preparatory meeting with Sharon, who serves geriatric community often through telemedicine, that's a challenge, right, for seniors. Would any of you care to say in particular how your efforts are addressing that population?
I'll speak to that a little bit. So there are definitely groups in Onondaga County that are focusing on services to seniors, specifically the Greater Syracuse Aging Services Coalition. They started up recently during the pandemic, and the digital divide is one of their main focuses. And they're also community centers. Interfaith Works has a program where they're working with seniors and senior companions to teach them digital literacy skills. And they're going to have an ongoing program for that. And also libraries around the county have programs and are willing to work one-on-one with seniors to help them improve their technology skills. So those are the things that come to my mind. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
And at the risk of jumping in advance of somebody else, Annabeth, is it the case that folks who serve as navigators would be more likely to serve seniors or recently new Americans, or would their skills be sort of put to a more specific purpose? I'm just curious for myself how that might work.
Yep. So our plan is to embed the digital navigators at various community centers and other community-based organizations. So for instance, we would be working with Interfaith Works. That's the plan. That's one of the groups that we are hopefully going to work with. And they are focusing on seniors and also new Americans. I know that a lot of the community centers also serve some new Americans and other groups. So it would really depend. I mean, the digital navigators would be helping everyone who needs it. We wouldn't certainly be turning anyone away, but there might be specific populations that one person would focus on versus another person, depending on where they're located.
Gotcha. Thank you. Anybody else want to come in on this? Jen, please.
Sorry, I'll just add, I think to build on that point, we had done a couple of working sessions several months ago where we were trying to really get ideas from various members of the community and organizations that serve a broad spectrum of the community for the types of needs that are out there in terms of being able to better access or utilize the internet. Certainly we heard that the senior population was one that we really needed to have some special emphasis on for all of the reasons we've been talking about. In addition to, seniors and also new Americans, which was another very specific theme that we kept hearing over and over again. I think there are some other populations, especially folks who don't speak English as a second language. And those aren't necessarily just our new Americans, but we have, large pockets. And in the city, I think we've got 26 or so languages spoken. And so there is going to be a need to make sure we have multilingual services around the internet. In addition, I think we need to take into account other types of handicaps that folks might have. I think there's additional assistive technologies that are available for folks who are blind or hard of hearing or have other disabilities. And so we need to make sure, if we're being inclusive and equitable around the internet, that those are other services that we're taking into account. And so I think, we're going to need to really look at the whole spectrum of need in this area and be able to address those different needs in different but complementary ways.
Gotcha. Anybody else want to comment on serving seniors, or should we move on to another question? Very good. We had a question actually come in the chat. We had an earlier posed question as well about where specifically, a sort of cartographic question. Jennifer, you shared just after that map, and I know you had planned to. Once again, a phenomenal set of panelists who anticipate the questions of their audience. David, in addition to releasing the recommendations of your study, as you said, soon, will folks be able to see that, those folks who went out and mapped on their devices those 200 miles, et cetera, is that something one can either now or will be able to later see, just from a purely informational standpoint?
Yes, certainly. So we're in the process of just reviewing the database that our consultant ECC prepared. So we do have maps at the county level. It shows the gaps in service in all 4 of our 5 counties. We didn't do Madison County because they had completed their own study. We're then taking the county level map that ECC has prepared, and we'll have town level maps. So be able to dive in a little bit closer, a little bit easier to observe. And all of that information, we'll make that available on our website in the coming months. So that will certainly be available. And I would encourage people to review the maps, particularly at the town level, because I think that's where you get a better look, being able to determine where there is service and where there's not. And if there's information you want to share with us when you're looking at the map, perhaps a street or a segment of the road that we're showing maybe as having service, but maybe it does not have service, to reach out to our office and share that information, and we'll certainly update the database. You can imagine trying to build a database like this over a 4-county area, hundreds of miles of roads. We think we have a very accurate database, but it's not 100% complete. So residents should certainly reach out to us when we have that up and available on our website.
Gotcha. Thank you. We had several questions, as I'm happy to say we always do in Focus Fora, asking how people can help. Many of you commented, you panelists, on collaborations between libraries and county and city and community centers. How can a not-for-profit human services agency or one community center that isn't perhaps collaborating now, are there ways in which either individuals or organizations can connect and push the ball forward on this issue, this challenge?
Let me start. I can take a first shot at that. As part of our study, there was a public survey, and maybe many of the people participating in this forum today took the online survey. But to communicate your interest and need for broadband service, I think is very, very helpful. So again, people could continue to reach out to our office. We've taken the survey down, but they can certainly send emails to the Regional Planning Board. That database, the public survey, and what additional responses might come in the weeks ahead will be very helpful to demonstrate to the internet service companies that there's additional demand out there for service. So it helps build market interest. And we want to use that information to help convince the broadband companies to build out a more robust network here in our region. And that would apply, certainly to homes, but nonprofits, libraries, small businesses, community centers, to express your need for broadband service and have us be able to catalog that information. And then we will share that with the broadband providers to convince them to make additional investments in the region.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I was going to say,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kevin.
All right, I was going to say, as simple as it sounds, if you could send either me or regional planning board, if you are unserved, just simply send your address so we make sure we have you covered in our project. Kevin Sexton at ongov.net or contact the regional planning board.
Cool. Thank you. Annabeth, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, the Central New York Digital Inclusion Coalition always welcomes new members. We're open to anyone in the community who wants to join us. We have meetings where we, talk about digital inclusion issues in Central New York. We talk about funding that's available, other things, other ways to get involved. So our website is onlinecny.org. And just, if there's a form to fill out that you can send to us if you're interested in getting put on our mailing list. But I would say just in general, talking more about digital inclusion issues with people, ask people, hey, what kind of internet access do you have at your house? And, how much do you pay for your plan and things like that? Like it's good to get a discussion going so that what other members of the community have and have accessible to them, and what options might be available to you as well.
Gotcha. Thank you, Scott, for putting that URL in the chat too. A few questions on how this affects employers. We all know that certainly finding a job, often these days, working at one's job takes place via is remote. Can anybody comment on perhaps the challenges or the solutions that are trying to address those challenges affect the business community or recruitment and retention of talent, or any of those types of issues?
Yeah, so I'm happy to start with that one, and others can chime in. I think there's definitely a similar need out there for the same infrastructure and capabilities that each of us and our neighbors have in our homes, and the small businesses and large businesses, frankly, that are in our communities. We know that we've got big ambitions, I think, to be a growing city and region. We have ambitions to attract more high-tech companies here. We hear all the time in the city from companies who, say, I really wish I could have this type of connectivity, or my building was wired in this way. And, ultimately, I think there's a real reliance on those same internet service providers and the telecommunications firms to make their technologies available and to upgrade their systems and their networks to the fastest, highest, capacity networks. And so even where we have, fiber-based networks in the city, I think there's room to upgrade those. You have to make, to Dave's point, in many cases, a market case for them to make the investment to do that and to upgrade their networks. But again, these same investments that we now are thinking about making, which can enable and support households with their connectivity, a lot of the same underlying fiber systems, et cetera, could support business users, for example. So the infrastructure can be leveraged for multiple things once you get it in place. I think the question that we all, think about a lot and struggle with, frankly, a lot is how do you pay for it, especially if and when the private sector isn't banging down our door to, install their own networks and implement their own technologies. We need to try to do whatever we can to encourage public-private partnership, to incentivize, those telecommunications firms to come and to provide capabilities, and to work with the business community, frankly, to make some investments themselves in upgrading, our digital infrastructure and the buildings, especially in our economic hubs throughout the region, because it is a big business competitiveness issue and a big issue around business attraction. So, I think it's something we ought to really focus on, and it's just an extension of this very same conversation, because it can rely on the exact same network technologies, whether you're connecting a home or a business.
Gotcha. Anybody else want to come in on that? All right, well, I see we're just about out of time. Thank you, everybody, for your comments and for all your hard work. It's great to see how much collaboration there is on this very complicated issue and how many smart people are working hard to address it. So I'll turn it back to you, Rita. Thanks.
Great. And I want to thank Dave, Annabeth, Jen, Kevin, and Sharon. It's been a very interesting and informative session. So I want to thank you all for being here. And I hope this has been an enjoyable and enlightening experience for everyone else. We'll be posting this forum on the Focus website shortly, focussyracuse.org. And always make the pitch. Focus is able to make these opportunities available with the financial support of the community. We are a very frugal organization, but we do appreciate support. So you can easily make a donation on our website, and that would be much appreciated. Also, look for our announcements on our Wisdom Keeper event that'll be happening at the end of October. We are thrilled to have Linda Brown Robinson, Van Robinson, and Marika Trier as our honorees this year. And we're thrilled to have them, and would love to have you join us for that celebration. Other than that, thank you all, and have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.